Welcome back, everybody. RC here on the grid, and I'm joined today by two other people that are not Matt or Scott. Actually, I'm not even Scott.
In disguise. I'm Scott in disguise.
In disguise, in disguise.
It's a good Halloween costume, right? Yeah. Test it out.
Doing pretty good. Look.
Scott, you looking good.
Thanks.
Anyway, my name is RC, and I'm just going to put my coffee away. And I'm joined to my right by Mr. P. Collins. What's going on, Pete? How you doing?
Hey, it's good to be here. It's been a wild week. Glad to be here with you guys, and I'm excited Mia is here with us.
Right. So to my left, we have the one and only Miss Mia McCormick. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Doing good. Doing good. This is your first time on the grid.
I know, my big debut. I'm really excited to be here.
I thought it was awesome. We're sitting around, and Scott is actually on shoots right now. So he's got a bunch of shoots that he's trying to line up, and he's just knocking them out. And he's like, listen, I'm not going to be able to do it, but what I want to do is I want you guys to come up with a topic, whatever it is that you guys want to do. And he said, but you have to involve Mia McCormick. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. Okay, cool. This will be something a little different.
So that we were all like, oh no, what can we talk to her about, right?
No. We weren't like, what can we talk to her about? No, we're not.
We are excited. We are going to tell everybody who doesn't know about you that they need to know about you today.
All right, but before we get to all of that stuff, I do want to do one thing. Make sure that you're registering for Photoshop World. All right, so let's get the housekeeping out of the way right now. Save the date. Photoshop World returns to Las Vegas September 3rd to the 5th. Save over $150 when you register on or before June 2nd. If you want up-to-the-minute information, make sure that you go to photoshopworld.com. You could also follow the action on Twitter by typing in @mypswworld, or you can go ahead and join us on Facebook at facebook.com/myphotoshopworld. Now, it's going to be on Pinterest. It'll be all over the place, so don't necessarily worry about that. So Photoshop World is something that we want to tell you it's happening in Vegas all the time, but we also have live seminar tours. So make sure that you go to KelbyOne.com/live. That is where you can find all of our one-day seminars, right? So I'm on the road with seminars. We have Corey. Corey's kicking off a brand new tour. I'm excited for him about that. So
yeah, and the commercial for it is phenomenal. Hopefully we'll see it.
Yeah, at one point or another. So we have Corey right there on June 25th. He's in New Orleans, right? So he's kicking it off right in New Orleans, and I think it's phenomenal. So he's done a great book, right? Photoshop Down and Dirty Tricks for Designers, and it went so well that what they wanted to do is they wanted to turn it into a seminar for designers and photographers who kind of wanted to take it to the next level. You can learn from the master. Right. Corey's, all of this stuff is going to be sitting in an 8-hour seminar. Make sure you guys join it. And in fact, this is going to be one of the prizes that you guys are going to win today. So a great book by a phenomenal Photoshop person. And you'll also win today the HDR book.
Oh, how convenient.
He's all right.
Who wrote that, RC?
It says here, RC.
Oh.
So anyway, so one of these two, somebody's going to win these two books. We'll put them over there. So what we wanted to do today is kind of have a little bit of a roundtable discussion, and I want to introduce you to all of the people that don't know anything about you, and we'll do that in a second. But I'll tell you guys right now, this isn't we're going to sit back here and we're going to talk to you guys about the things that you need to do, although there will be some of that. What I wanted to be able to do is have kind of a little bit of a discussion around inspiration and the path to get yourself to inspiration. Now, we're pulling triple duty. We're watching what's happening here on the chat. We've got Darcy joining us and helping us in the chat. We've got Ajna watching on Twitter as well. So if you have a conversation, if you have something to be able to contribute to this, we'd love to be able to hear from you. Make sure that you go to KelbyOne.com/thegrid. Inside of there, join the conversation, join the chat. I want to know what kinds of things inspire you. What do you look for when you look for inspiration? Other photographers? Who? Music? What? Food? What do you eat? We want to hear about it. So that's where we're going to pick up when we come back from this break with Mia McCormick and Mr. P. Collins. We'll see you guys in a bit.
Hey Corey, we're going to that new pizza place across the street after work. You in?
I really wish I could, man. I'm under deadline with this book. I gotta get it done.
You're a machine, Corey. You're a machine!
Well, you have no idea.
compositing mind of Corey Barker. Learn step-by-step Photoshop tricks, type effects, extracting, textures, Hollywood effects, and really badass 3D. Photoshop Down and Dirty Tricks for Designers, Volume 2. Your mind will be composited away.
Welcome back, everybody. RC here with Miss Beacon and Mrs. Mia McCormick. What's going on? What's going on? Oh, good. We're checking the chat.
We're trying to.
Everybody's like quickly scouring the chat and looking at stuff, and I'm like,
Well, hey, during the break, somebody chimed in and said, RC, what laptop are you using? So,
I am using a Razer. So I'm a big fan on the PC side. I'm a big fan of the work that the guys at Razer are doing. If you want to be able to follow most of this stuff, you go to razor1.com. So we'll pull that up during one of the next breaks. But it's a 14-inch, so this is the Razer Blade laptop. And it's a laptop that has probably one of the sharpest laptops that's out there. I think it's a phenomenal. It looks like it's all blown out, so don't necessarily worry about it. But this is an Intel Core i7, so it's the new generation Core i7 laptop, the smallest gaming performing laptop that's out there, and it has a full touch screen. So a lot of the times, like if you want to do anything, you can just do it right there. So we're playing around with it. We're kicking the tires. I think that from a gaming standpoint, people that are doing gaming and people that are doing video production, as well as a lot of graphic design, they share a lot of the same common traits. So when you're looking for a laptop, a lot of the times I tell people gaming laptops are really, really good for that. And I think Razer's doing very well. Sorry. Another Razer plug. I'm like, I get into it. I start nerding out.
I just want to know,
what inspires RC? Technology, maybe?
Just a little bit. Just a little bit. Yes, a little bit. But now, hey, before we do any of that stuff, I do want to make sure that we give Mia a great due here. First off, for those of you who don't know, this is Mia McCormick.
You've now heard it like 10 times.
Right.
We figured out who the female
Brand name
is.
recognition. You just continue to say it until people can remember it.
Got it.
That's what happens. But anyway, tell us a little bit about the stuff that you're doing here on KelbyOne.
Well, probably what most people know if they are subscribers of KelbyOne is the inspirational interviews. So I talk to a lot of the photographers out there that are the very best in the business. I mean, industry leaders, Joe McNally, Peter Hurley, Zach Arias, Cliff Montner. You know, these are the guys that are really at the top of their game doing the very best work that you're seeing. And here on Kelby, you know, you can see a lot of classes about the technique of how they're doing things, but you don't necessarily learn what they're thinking behind it and what inspires them to create the way that they do. So I ask them, you know, I research and I ask them questions and kind of delve into their minds about how they come up with the picture or the inspiration behind the picture. And so that's basically what I do. That project, that specific project.
Okay. On top of, you have a bunch of other things that you do. You do reviews.
Right.
You because it's not just she's a journalist, right? You have a background in journalism. You were actually a news anchor.
Yeah, I did 10 years in journalism at various stations around the country. So I was a reporter. I did everything from editing to writing to reporting to anchoring. So.
Okay. So, but then on top of that, you have a technical background.
Right. So I review gear for B&H, video gear, just about anything from DSLR video to ENG style cameras. We talk about gear from lights to mics to cameras to anything, basically. I've reviewed laptops even, but really video is where my expertise is.
Right, and all of this stuff comes, and the reason that I'm pointing this out is that all of this stuff really does come together in a big merge where now you're doing a lot of stuff on the video production side, getting people onto the world of video.
Exactly.
So,
in fact, I have a class coming out on DSLR video basics. So you'll learn about all the video settings and basic gear that you might need and things like that.
Okay, so
Lenses.
that's one of the reasons that we were very excited about it, because she does kind of switch hit in that the fact that you do bring a very journalistic eye into some of these things, as well as a technological background. And putting all of that stuff together, it's a great way to be able to get people that are on the fence on the concept of video to kind of jump over and start taking a look at that.
Why not? Make the leap. It's a lot of fun. I mean, as much fun as photography is, imagine a whole new creative avenue to open up.
All right. Now, I will say this, just to completely embarrass her. She is also like the mentor for the group. Like a lot of the times, like our presentation and things like that and all that kind of stuff, we're always just like, so how'd we do, Mia? Did we do okay?
She just shakes her head and goes, I need some coffee.
So anyway, so she's the secret hand that makes everything kind of look better from a presentation standpoint. So it's a little nerve-wracking.
I tell them to shave. That's about it.
Okay. All right. Now let's get back to the interview. Let's get back to the interview process. So we're talking about the interview, and inside of the interview, so you've worked with a whole bunch of different people, and you.
Well, I'm sorry. We've lost most people on the feed. Why don't we take a quick break, see if we can get something worked out, because nobody's seeing anything right now, and I don't want to miss out on Mia.
Oh, perfect.
So let's take a quick break. Sorry, guys. We'll see if we can kick the tires, get the thing working a little bit better, and we'll come right back.
Okay.
When bad weather strikes and threatens your next outdoor shoot, you need the experience. The experience of a photographer that can handle any situation.
Get your hair out of your eyes! Come on!
The experience of Joe McNally.
Bad weather doesn't mean you can turn in a bad shoot. It's really bad weather out here, Harry! I'm not gonna leave this dock without a picture.
Trust Joe to teach you the tips you'll need to capture stunning photos even when the weather turns ugly.
Anybody there see the sun? I don't.
Don't let bad weather ruin your next...
I'm happy again. What am I supposed to out here? Sing a chorus of I Feel Pretty?
Don't let bad weather ruin your next photo shoot.
Telling people what is perfectly obvious, that the weather sucks!
Rely on Joe McNally to help you weather the storm.
The miracle of photography visits us again. We are...
Learn how to take great photos in bad weather. Watch Joe McNally.
Whoa, was that the same cow?
I really didn't think that was that important. I'm sorry, guys.
Wow. Pete tripped over the cable, and down goes the internet. So, anyway, welcome back, everybody. RC here with Mr. Pete Collins and me, McCormick. We've had a little bit of a technical difficulty, which is kind of a bit of a pain, but the important part about all of this stuff is that we're back.
Yes.
We're back. We're back online, baby. Now, a lot of this stuff, for those of you who are watching YouTube, isn't going to make any kind of sense, so most of the stuff will be edited anyway. But for those of you who guys are live, thanks so much for sticking through it. You guys kept up on the chat. We're asking lots of questions, so I think it'll be really good. This will just kind of be our little secret. And the magic of post-editing will do that. Now, for those of you who have seen all of this stuff, live, and missed the entire introduction to Mia, you might want to go take a look at the YouTube thing as soon as that goes up tomorrow. So, but one of the things that you were talking about before, when we last left off, was that you've done all of these interviews with all of these different people, from Alaric Fallon to Heisler to McNally, and there's a common thread in a lot of these things.
Well, in trying to find out what inspires them, everybody has a different path to get to inspiration. I mean, nobody had the same answer about what works for them, but they all know that it takes, there's work involved. There's workmanship involved. You have to know your craft. You have to know technique. You have to know your gear before inspiration can really take flight.
Okay, so it's broken itself down really into two components when we're working with this, which is there has to be a source of inspiration. And then once that source of inspiration is identified, then from there, you have to kind of work it, right? It's not just a question of just kind of, and you're doing that inspiration and then you're done. So once we've identified that you need it and then you need to work on it, it would be interesting to find out what kinds of things inspire other people when we're working with this.
A lot of people have actually kind of chimed in on the chat and said really what's inspired them, right?
So what do we have? So we have Matt Charnitsky. Can you read that?
Charnitsky. When I have a hard time getting inspired, I concentrate on things like texture, repeating shapes, symmetry, etc. Then once I start to delve into those ideas, ideas start flowing, I guess. Sorry, the jib was going right in front of that as a reading. But yeah, those things, once you start looking for them, the ideas start flowing when you see the different things like the textures, repeating shapes, symmetry. Looks like visual inspiration.
Okay, so it's just seeing the pattern, seeing most of that stuff. What else do we have there?
Well, I saw a comment that said, taking getting out of their comfort zone. That's when inspiration comes, is when they stop doing what they've been doing over and over again and kind of push the limits. And one of the things that I found with the Joe McNally interview in particular is that Joe rises to the challenge. Joe loves a challenge. So pushing out of the comfort zone seems to be kind of a common thing that lots of photographers
It's like, how do we get better? How do we, like, set the bar and then try to climb up for it? So that's something that's definitely a challenge.
Ian H. says cash always inspires him.
Hey, you know what? Cash can be a great motivator.
It
If that's
really
kind of what, if you need to make rent and you're short, it could be a pretty good motivator. You can't eliminate it. So from there, so we have, let's see, Mark Rodriguez. I try to make photos that make me not believe I actually created them. I try to impress myself first, and that motivates me to share what I do with others. My inspiration is then, I guess, would be some sort of inner fulfillment. No, I think that's a great way to be able to take a look at that stuff. At the end of the day, I think you have to be the most satisfied with yourself when you work with these kinds of things. Now, one of the things that I thought that I would see more of is other people's work. I would have thought that I would have seen more. Like Sandy Joy just jumped in and she said, I get inspired by seeing other people's work. And it's one of those things that I thought was very, very different from this. And one of the first things that you do when you hear photographers and you want to be able to get better as a photographer, a lot of the times you have to go back and study other photographic work. It's much like if you're doing art, you have to study art history. If you're doing photography, you have to do photography history. But it would seem that there's a common core right now of a lot of different things. Like somebody just said, Tim R. Fleuren, sorry for a competitor, always inspires me. There's nothing wrong with having different places. I just happen to think that we're the best at doing this. But wherever you get your inspiration, I think is a great thing for that. Now, cliche, but music inspires me.
We also had another, I'm sorry, I talked right over you, but we also had the same thing. Listening to music that matches what I'm shooting definitely sets a tone for me. I thought you wrote this because, and you'll talk about this more later, it definitely music, other things can have that inspiring thing to get you into the mood of doing the work you need to do.
And that's one of the things that I thought was really good. So we have like repeating patterns that help, setting a bar kind of too high for yourself so that you could work. That seems to be another common inspiration thing.
There's outside and inside. Some people get inspired by something outside, by seeing other people's work, by music, and some people get inspired by something inside, that inner fulfillment, that inner push, that inner challenge.
Okay. Now, let's throw it, I want to throw it to you first. And we'll talk a little bit about this. As a journalist, I know that you've spent a lot of time working on stories and digging and reporting. Like you've gone overseas, you've done some stuff on sex trafficking.
In Thailand,
So
and I was in Haiti right after the earthquake.
Okay, so for you, what kinds of things inspire you to be able to develop, to create, not just, not pictures, because you're not doing photography, so to speak, but what inspires you to create something?
Well, it sounds very cliche, but as the journalist, it's the story. When I get an assignment or I get a subject matter, it's very cold to me until I start to talk to the people that are involved. Like I was assigned to do something on prescription drug abuse because it was a huge, at the time in Sarasota, it was a huge thing. It's a huge thing across Florida right now. And to me, that story didn't have any soul until I talked to addicts. And that's when I can start to feel, that's when you get like that warm, tingly feeling, and I start to feel the story coming together and know that it's going to appeal to people and know that it's going to move people and have an emotion. Because that's when it starts to move me. So I do a lot of research, I do a lot of digging, and then I start to connect the dots of people in this addict and their story and this clinic and what they've gone through and how they're dispensing things. And when I start to see all of those things kind of connect to form something whole that's going to make an impact, to me, that's like the basis of inspiration for me.
All right. So, and I wanted to be able to point that out because I thought that it was very different, because a lot of the times when we think of inspiration, you'd be surprised as to where the fount can come from, where your motivations can come from, and the result really is immaterial to you. Like you're doing, you're as a journalist, it's very different as a photographer. But to hear that, I'm like, oh, that's actually kind of cool to hear where the inspiration comes from and the connections come from and most of that stuff.
So I've met photographers that are inspired by the story, right? Their subject and the story of their subject or what's happened to their subject, trying to create an environmental portrait about what's happened to a subject or the way that they work, that's really where they've drawn inspiration from.
Right, like immediately the first person that comes to mind is probably Heisler.
Yes.
So it's like Heisler's very driven by the story, very driven by most of that stuff. And McNally.
Well, I was going to say McNally is a storyteller both with the camera and without the camera. He weaves a story, and that's all part of what makes him so good is the storyteller.
He builds the relationship. To him, the relationship that he makes with his assignment, basically, the person that is his assignment, that's what inspires his photos.
So it's interesting in that you're digging to be able to find connection between these parts, and the relationship between these parts is a good source of inspiration, something that you might want to consider. Now let's flip it to the completely different side of things with Pete. Now, Pete, you're a very talented artist, and you work specifically on, it's not photographs and it's not graphic designs, but it's more kind of illustration. And you spend a lot of time dealing in the world of illustration. Phenomenal work. Where do you go to be able to produce those kinds of things?
Well, you know, we talked about this when we were discussing it, and I started thinking, you know, what does inspire me? And I get inspiration from all over the place. And somebody else said this, my kids, living with my kids and seeing how they see the world, and then putting myself back at their age. And it's like, what did I want to know back then? And I think I grew up a lot. I raised myself a lot in some ways. I was definitely home by myself a lot, and so I had TV and other things that were my guides. And so I had to discover a lot of things. And so I want to help other people discover things that I've learned without necessarily having to go through some of the same hardships or whatever I have. And so that drives me to tell a story and to teach and to take complex ideas and make it easy to understand. So for me, illustrations, kids' books, and stuff like that could take very deep issues and ratchet them down to something that's very easy for even a 5-year-old to understand, because that's my audience. I want to give you something that you go, oh, now I get it, because I crave that eureka moment when it comes in somebody else's eyes, because I feel like I've given them the opportunity to take hold of something that they didn't have to learn the hard way.
I think it's good. Now, I will tell you this, and he doesn't know that I'm going to say this. I will tell you this. Pete Collins will be the next Dr. Seuss in no time. You saw him here first.
I would not like it on the grid. I would not like it. No, I'm sorry.
No, please don't do that. But there's a lot of phenomenal work, and one of the things that I enjoy about listening to the two of you talk about this kind of stuff is that it's a very personal, it's a very, very committed relationship that you have with the story, with the idea, with your past. And a lot of that stuff isn't just, I'm thinking of a color, I want a color to be able to come up. And it's probably one of the biggest misconceptions that people have if you're just starting out and you become a photographer and you're like, all right, great, I want to take my pictures past that snapshot. What do I do? And they're like, well, you know, you got to go search for inspiration. But no one really says how. No one really ever says, this is what you look for. Look into your past. Look into the relationships that you have with yourself, with other things, and draw from that and try to see if you can make a picture from that. No one ever really says, find a voice inside of a story and then try to connect it with something else and put it together.
So, RC, how do you do that?
For me, but it sounds very... Mine sounds very pithy compared to most of this stuff. A lot of the times, a lot of the work that I do is and I sympathize with a lot of people that have talked about music. Theater and music have always been very, very important to me. So, like, I have a background in English literature. I have a background in education, English literature with a concentration in Shakespeare. You could not find a more left-leaning artistic person than me. And then I have a lot of background in theater performance and music. So for me, a lot of the pictures that I try to be able to make are based on mood, are based on feeling more than they are subject. So I'll spend a lot of time driving. I was telling people I'll get in my car, I'll throw on music, and I'll just drive. I'll grab a Red Bull, grab a coffee, and I sit down and I just drive. And it's like, well, where are you going? And I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea as to where I'm going. I just know that I'm listening to stuff. And it's music. Sometimes it's like, I just throw a channel and it goes random. And I'll just let it go and I'll let it go. And then I'll listen to something and I'll let it kind of just make me feel a specific way. Like Peter Gabriel. And you'll listen to Peter Gabriel and you'll hear one song, let's say Mercy Street or something by Peter Gabriel, and it'll make you feel a specific way. And then once you're in that feeling, a lot of the times, that's when I turn around and go, this feels weird. And then that feeling can kind of becomes very method at that point, where it's like that feeling will bring me to a spot and bring me to a place and make me think of an idea. And then all of a sudden, that picture starts taking form. And all of a sudden, I'm like, okay, I see this feeling, I see this idea, I see this card. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, okay, I got it. I know exactly what I want to be able to do with this picture. Then at that point, that becomes the attack plan. I write everything down. I know exactly what I want. I know exactly what the mood that I was feeling at the time. I know the music that I want to be able to do. I know the picture that I want to work on. And then it becomes very systematic. So from a very emotional place, it becomes extremely systematic. It's like, these are all of the things that I want to hit. Here's the square that I want to be able to make. Now let's go attack that square. So it starts at a very esoteric place and ends up very, very, there's a notebook, there's an idea, there's sketches, there's all of this kind of stuff, and it goes, go. And oftentimes when I'm doing the picture, if I'm by myself, a lot of the times, like I don't want to do it with other people, but if I'm by myself, I'm listening to whatever it is that I was hearing at the time, and I'm literally watching it and going, does this feel like what's in my ear? Does this feel like what I'm doing? So I'm very motivated. I'm very motivated by literature. I'm very motivated by other photographers, and I'm very motivated by music.
Something that I think is really interesting is the idea of inspiration for what I call, when I interview these photographers, personal work. So when you're developing an image that you have no, it's completely based from you. You have no client. It's not a job. But then developing inspiration for a job when you're within the confines of what a client is asking for, there's a whole separate process to that for some of these photographers. Of, like, let's say Lindsay Adler, for example. She's a fashion photographer. She makes a board, what she calls an inspirational board, that has textures and colors and snippets from magazines and ideas that she wants to be able to pull to create an image. Whereas Gregory Heisler is like, don't show me anything like that. No, that's the worst thing you can do. You're clogging my brain. So he gets a job and he goes to a location and he's like, where can I pull from this organically to create something light and whatnot? And it develops out there.
Yeah.
So, but everybody's different. Everybody's different in how their approach to it. But I think that there is a different line of inspiration for when you're working on something for you and when you're working on something for a client or a job.
Yeah, I have a horrible man crush on Gregory Heisler.
Well,
I think it's horrible. So that's like, I'm like, yeah, but he's Gregory Heisler. He's the Grand Master. Like, he can do it from nothing. Anyway.
When you talked about that, it reminds me of Joe Glida, who we have on KelbyOne, who he worked for Kraft. And he said, there's only so many ways you can make Velveeta look sexy. Right. And that was what developed that. That was his job. He developed his whole way of getting inspired by doing self-assignments, because he was shooting the same things, and he had to take himself out of that to get inspired. And we all have to figure out what inspires us and develop a system so that we can be inspired, because the worst thing is when you stare at that blank screen and it taunts you.
Yeah, and it can taunt you. You know what? There's a lot of people that we talk to all the time that are like, oh, working here is got to be the best place on earth. Working here is got to be great. You get to play, you get to do stuff. And I'm like, guys, at the end of the day, we're grateful to work here, but it's a job. It can get to be a job just like anything else. And everybody runs into the exact same thing. You stare at the screen and you expect something to come back at you.
It's writer's block,
and
right?
It's writer's block.
But for photographers, this is something that I discussed very specifically with Zach Arias, because this happens to him like every year. He feels like he hits a wall and he can't pull inspiration from anywhere. It's like writer's block, but he just can't get through it. So I'm like, what do you do? What do you do? And if you've seen any of his videos, he transforms, he reinvents. And he's not the only one. Joel Grimes, the same way. He said this is the third time in his career that he's had to reinvent himself. And where do you go to do that? How do you do that when you just take everything and push it away and you start over? Where does that inspiration come from?
I think Monaco has a great quote here, and it says, "For me, it's a circle of learning and experimenting. Learning a new technique inspires me to experiment, and that leads to new ideas, which make me want to learn more. Once I have a particular technique down, that frees me up to push the envelope and dream up new images." And I think that's so beautiful, because inspiration is really, you get the spirit within you to push beyond and to do something new and to create something new. And so there is this inspiration and learning have to come hand in hand. You have to be a student and keep, like a child. You know, a child doesn't have, you don't have to inspire a child. They get inspired by a straw wrapper or anything. All of a sudden it's a toy or whatever, because they're learning, and they're always learning. And the people that are most inspiring and the most inspired are usually the ones that are committed to learning more and more each day and keep pushing into that learning so that they can try something new.
But I think that at the core of everything that we're doing here, I think that the one message, right, and I don't want to mess with Scott and Matt's format too much on this, because when they're doing the grid, a lot of the times they want to be able to give you a takeaway to do that stuff. And I wanted to kind of be a little different in that I wanted to have a very organic debate about this, but there is a very solid takeaway that you guys can have for most of this stuff, is that if you're starting at photography and you're working on most of this stuff, there is a very good sense of inspiration that you do need to be able to have. You can't work in a vacuum. Like, you can't, as a photographer, you can't just grab the camera and go click, click, you know, click randomly and think like it has to be from within. It has to have something, and be it music, be it the story, be it inner experiences. You do need to find somewhere to be able to draw from, because that's going to be the fount by which you then put your fingerprint on it and go, well, based on what I've seen, this is my contribution to the conversation. Based on what I've seen, this is how I'm going to reflect that. But you need to have that kind of basis before you start with anything else. So,
well, one of the things that we had kind of talked about was the difference between knowing your gear and knowing your technique and having inspiration as two separate things, right? Workmanship and craftsmanship, right? But I think that there are times when they can kind of go together, because just thinking back to the interview that I did with Joel Grimes, for him, in education, learning was what helped to inspire him. So a new technique, learning a new technique, is what kind of gave him the breath to be able to do a whole new scope of work.
Absolutely, absolutely. So once you have it, then you got to do something with it. And I think that this is where Pete has had a very interesting story when we were talking about Brian Rogers. So let's do this. Let's get and take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit. Now that you know that you've given yourself permission to be able to do inspiration and you found it, what do you do with it? How do you work it? And that's Pete's got a great story on this when we come back here on The Grid.
Hey everyone, my name is Matt Klaskowski, and I want to let you know that we've put together a Lightroom mobile launch center over at KelbyOne. Ever since the iPad came out, there's really been one overwhelming request from Lightroom users, and that's Lightroom integration with the iPad. Well, it's here, and it's called Lightroom Mobile. We put together a launch center with videos, tips, links, and FAQs to help you get up and running with it. And don't forget, the launch center, it's really just the tip of the iceberg. We hope that you'll check out the hundreds of courses and videos that we have over at KelbyOne that teach you Lightroom, Photoshop, photography, and really all things creative. So head over to KelbyOne, check it out.
Welcome back, everybody. RC here with Mia McCormick and Mr. Pete Collins. We're talking, the concept is inspiration. I'm gonna give you a second kind of set up on most of that. But what we've talked about is just to kind of have a very roundtable discussion on the concept of what inspires you, or what do you do to be able to get inspired. And I wanted to have a conversation with the people inside of the chat and with all of you guys to bring you certain ideas. You're probably sitting there as a photographer going, I don't know where to go to get inspiration. I don't know how to be able to put it into my work. And hopefully by listening to what other people are doing, or listening to the stories of Mia or Pete or myself to some degree, this will give you at least a roadmap for you to be able to go try to find something. Now, Pete's got a great example of a person not only finding it, but then really actually working it through to be able to produce something that's really, really cool. Now, Pete, talk to us a little bit about Brian Rogers Jr.
Okay, well, one of the things, I oversee the member side of the website of KelbyOne, and each week I judge the image of the week, and then I have a Photoshop contest that I do over there. And I choose the the top 5 images of the week, and last week, Brian Rogers was one of my editor's choices. And so I can back up and you can see it. But once I picked that and talked about it, and I do a little write-up of each of the images and why I chose it or whatever, he wrote me back and said, thank you so much for choosing one of my images. I have this video that I did, this time-lapse video I did of a personal project that I was working on. And he sent it to me, and it was so good that I put it on the NAP member website. And if you're a member of KelbyOne, please go over there and take a look at it. We're not going to play it right now. But he goes through and he does this personal project of a car, and he sets it up, he shoots it, he lights it, and they're giving me... And so he puts it in there, and the thing is that he doesn't have a lot of gear, but what he does with his gear is phenomenal, and he has some incredible commercial photography that he does that he has made work. And that's where I got so inspired by his work, and what I say is he is a true craftsman with the tools that he has. And that's when we start talking about this whole inspiration or whatever. I get inspired seeing somebody who takes the tools that they have and they master them to the point where they are basically like a master, boy, I'm repeating myself, master craftsman. They can do things with it, and you know, because they've spent time working with their tools, that it's no longer just their workmen just plugging things in, but they're taking that and developing art as they're working it. It's almost like a symphony watching them work with whatever they're doing. And it got me thinking about the difference between a workman and a craftsman. And I think my desire, it inspired me to want to be more of a craftsman than just a workman. I got to get in here and be real efficient and move these things around and knock it out. And hopefully nobody will see the places where I cut a corner here or I did this here. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Just get it up on site. I want to do the dance and the symphony of a craftsman. And that's what inspired me with Brian, because I know where he's coming from. He didn't have a big light set up, so what he did is he shot the car, and then he waited for it to get night. He left the car there, then he light painted so that he could come back in and use those shots to fill in where the reflections were from the daytime to be able to do it. He didn't have a studio, but he figured out a way to work it with his camera and his setup and just some flashlights. And I'm like, that's what I want to do. I'm inspired by seeing somebody else really work it. So go check it out on our member website, or you can go to digitalartthatrocks.com, and that's Brian Rogers Jr. That you can check.
And
it
he
out.
has a time lapse there on the digital.
He does have it on
his website, so we got to make sure that we put that out.
I'll pull that up too.
We'll pull that out. Mia, we've got a couple of comments. What can you share from the chat that's coming in?
Right, it says if you breathe life into it and take it from a sterile subject to something thought or emotion provoking, that's when you realize that you've really put some inspiration into something. And that's by Aaron K. And it's true, right? When you start to feel something, when an image makes you feel something, that's what you hear. That's what I hear, at least over and over again from these masters of their work when I talk to them, is an image has to make you feel. And that's when you know that you've been inspired. It's interesting because I ask them, bring me 15 to 20 images of your work that you would say is inspiring, what you find inspiring about your work. And they kind of are like, because they know what other people find inspiring, but to them, it's totally different. Some of the images you see, like some of the images that I got from Joe McNally, I mean, they just would blow you away because they don't look like anything to you, but to him, it was totally different. It moved him. He was emotionally connected.
Right, and that was the one thing that I thought that you said very well. It kind of put me in my own spot to thinking about it when you said working with the story, and when you're looking inside of the story, you feel a certain amount of warmth. It's like when you connect with it and you feel it and you see it and you're like, oh man, there is something there. And that's the part. Like, I don't think it matters at all ever if I become a great photographer or a good photographer, or that you get to the end of whatever it is, a master, an icon, whatever, it doesn't matter. All that matters to me, and this happened to me when I was out in Colorado. I was driving with a guy, Michael, and we're driving around, and he's like, well, you know, I just feel bad that I'm taking you to this one spot, like 11,000 feet, almost fell off the side of this mountain thing. And he's like, I just feel bad because I want you to get a good picture. And he's like, and I'm like, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter whether or not you get a picture. It doesn't matter whether or not the picture comes out good or not. To me as a photographer, what matters to me is to have that feeling. Whatever it is that gets me that feeling, I'm excited about. Whatever concept I come up with that makes me feel warm, that makes me feel like I'm onto something, that's what I'm looking for. I hope that translates to a picture, but that's the part that I want. The part that I really want is to feel connected with my work in such a manner that it makes me want to go out and find it. Whether I do or don't, it's like fishing. I don't really care about whether, I mean, I hope that I do, but it doesn't bother me when I don't. So that was the one takeaway for me, that when I was looking at that, I was just like, oh, that's actually pretty cool. Philip Jacob, the journey is more fulfilling than the destination. And I would even take it even further if you wanted to get even deeper. It's not so much the journey, but the feeling of embarking on one. It's the feeling behind it that I think that's more important than the actual journey, than the actual destination, although going someplace is really cool. Now, so we've talked about that. So images are a conversation. Inspiration should give images that trigger you to create your own work that adds to the conversation, rather than create images that say, me too, by Jacob Lucas. Yes, and that's one of the things that I tend to call it fingerprints. And actually, that's not even a me thing, that's a Carlos Santana thing. He was talking about music, and he's like, at the end of the day, music is a very, very limited box by which you play. Like, if you follow blues, and I'm a big fan of blues, there's only certain things that you can do. However, how you bend a string and how you pull this and how you write a note or how you do this stuff gives you an opportunity to put your fingerprint on the conversation. It's like you see this thing happen and you put your fingerprint on it. There are going to be thousands of pictures that are made of this building at sunset with this person passing by and doing this kind of stuff. But when you pick up your camera, you put your fingerprint into that conversation. That moment has your fingerprint, and it's going to be very, very different from person to person to person.
Getting to that spot, though, that's the hard part, because, and I may tick some people off when I say this, because I'm seeing a lot of this, and I heard a lot from the photographers looking at other people's work. You know, the one thing about viewing others' work here, Tony Drum, you have to dissect it to understand why it connects with you, then figure out how to apply that to your own work. That is not looking, it's studying. And studying and reverence for somebody else's work is two different, I mean, that's one thing. Finding your own inspiration can be something totally different. That's what I heard from Gregory Heisler. That's what I heard from Eric Valland. That, yeah, they had people that they looked to study and had reverence for, but the inner inspiration actually comes from something very different inside of you. So I know a lot of people are saying that other people's work is what inspires them. But I think that there might be two different things there. Reverence and inspiration are two different things.
Well, I think I love that you said that, because I think inside of each one of us, we've got a different voice. And that's the thing. No matter how much you try to copy somebody else, you're going to have a different result because you're involved in it. And if I sit here and I have reverence for that image over there, even if I try to copy it, the me is going to come out in my copy. And so better than just trying to become a puppet of that, I need to figure out the voice of me.
Right. Here's a great example of something that I think we're beginning to see a lot of right now. So Alexandra says, copying someone's style is not going to lead you to your own. And I always bring it back to the music analogy. There is not one unless the person who invented the guitar, there is not one person who's learned the guitar that hasn't learned by copying other people's stuff. You know, like blues people learned how to be able to make their music copying horn riffs, like Chuck Berry. The reason Chuck Berry's Johnny B. Good and all of that kind of stuff, the reason that he plays the way that he plays was because he wanted to take his guitar and actually make it sound like a horn, like a trumpet. That brings his style. Eric Clapton learned from these other people, learned from these blues guitarists. You know, Iron Maiden learned from somebody else. Metallica finds these other people inspiring. And everybody starts by playing somebody else's thing. And once you find it, the study is the part that's the most important of it. You're like, well, what do I like of this? You know, you could look at Jimmy Page, who looked at Chuck Berry, who looked at horn players, and Jimmy Page turned around and said, they sound like horns. So what happens if I pick up a guitar and I run a bow on it? And now you have Dazed and Confused. You know, it's like there's an analogy. It's an organism. It's a breathing organism.
Oh, you can think back to Scott last week, right? He saw Regina's technique of how she did it. He said, I love these photos. I want to be able to make a portrait like that. So he figured out the way that she did it and set it all up. But how do you put your own, how do you own it?
The fingerprint. How do you put it in there?
Right.
People are freaking out because they're like, Iron Maiden. Yes, I was an Iron Maiden Seventh Son guy. I listened to Bruce Dickinson.
Well, and this is where part of the conversation we had. It's interesting to see the debate between artist, craftsman, workman, and the immediate versus the long term. What I'm trying to struggle with in my own life, you know, we're all on this journey, is I so want to create art quickly and get it done and create this beautiful picture that everybody loves. And I so often want to shortcut the journey of becoming the craftsman. Give me 5 tips so I can have the same output as a craftsman without having to put the work in. To know how the tools work and to spend the 5 years making all the mistakes. I just want the tips to it. Now, granted, we give you tips. We show you hopefully how to shortcut some of that, but then to become a craftsman, I need to take what I know and those tools that I have and spend time working them. And
I think that's exactly the point. Spending time working with them. I think that's the part that we do very, very well, but we don't talk about very, very well. I think that, you know, and I think that credit to the Kelby organization in having you work with these people to talk about inspiration and working on this kind of stuff, because I think that we are now getting to a point where we're talking to people and saying, listen, you need to be able to learn the tools. You need to be able to learn the technique. But like social media, Facebook, you know, Google Plus, Pinterest makes it really hard for people to believe you when it comes to that stuff, because what happens is a lot of the times people are like, I've got to produce, I got to produce, I got to produce, I got to create, I got to produce. I didn't post anything on Facebook. I didn't post this awesome picture on Facebook. And I'm like, Ansel Adams did his best work when he was 28. He was like well into his 60s. However, the most memorable stuff was when he was 28. You know, if you did anything that was more than 3 pictures a year, you were considered a success. But now it's like in the age of Photoshop and filters and things like that, everybody buys these things, gets the technique, goes, well, I'm just going to slap 3 filters onto something and that'll be my inspiration. And it's like, well, it's a little bit more complex than that, but we don't say that. We don't work with that. And I think that it puts a lot of unrealistic expectations on people because they go, well, I did what I was supposed to do. I bought the lights, I bought the camera, I bought the filters, I put the 2 lights in the corner, I put the main light, I edited the way you told me to edit it, and I put it up on Facebook, but I'm not the next.
Or I don't feel connected to it.
Yeah.
I don't connect with what I've produced. It looks good, and maybe, you know, 500 people like it, but I don't feel fulfilled by what I've done.
Well, and that's the quickest way. Here's the flip side of it, the quickest way to get uninspired. When you are producing stuff for other people that doesn't have your heart involved in it. Because then you are dancing somebody else's tune. But that's where we've gotten into society. Oh, I've got to create my own style. And this is, go back to the Gregory Heiser interview where he talked about how he could, you know, he needed to find his own style, and he thought about, well, I could do this, I could do that. But at the end of the day, he had to do something that matched him.
Vision.
And so many of us think, oh, I just got to grab onto this. Ooh, I got a great idea. Nobody else has done this. But if your heart's not in it, you're going to clobber yourself in the end.
And probably to bring this over into the social media side, when we're talking about Facebook and talking about breaking out or becoming bigger or becoming better and all that stuff, there's a lot of conversation out on the internet that talks about, well, there's millions of cameras and there's millions of DSLRs and there's millions of copies of Photoshop now. Everybody could become a photographer. Everybody can do this. how do I compete? How do I become? And I always tell people two different analogies that I use. One of them is there's millions of pianos out there. You know, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be millions of pianists. There's tons of pianos, but not that many people that are really, really good at it. So that's not necessarily something that's valid. And the horrible part about the second part of it is, at the end of the day, those who put the effort and those who put the true dedication into it, I mean, really, really get into it, really rise above all of this stuff. Perfect example. You were said, 16-year-old kid, I think it was at the time, living outside of Toronto, was taking pictures of homeless people, and really, really, really worked on the pictures of homeless people, and really worked on his technique, and really worked on all this kind of stuff. And there were a lot of people doing this, but all of a sudden people are like, have you seen Joey L's work? Like, have you seen this? And all of a sudden this kid became 18 years old, moved to New York, shot with 50 Cent, shot Jonas Brothers, now travels to Africa, is doing some stuff with the Discovery Channel. And it's like, good work will rise above the din. Regina Pagels, perfect example. We talked about her yesterday. Sits in a 400 square foot studio, really focuses on this stuff, really focuses on all of this technique, and just rises above the din. It'll just come up, depending on how hard you work with this. Now, what I will say is this, to think about this. Now, it doesn't necessarily apply as much now, but there was a great interaction that you had with McNally when you guys were talking about your interview. And if you haven't seen this, make sure you go to the KelbyOne website. The comments have just been off the charts on this interview with you and McNally.
He's Joe McNally. I mean, he's awesome. Like Pete said, he's a storyteller. So every image has this fantastic story behind it.
But I'm going to butt in right here. Okay, Mia has interviewed some incredible photographers. And what do we hear from, I think it's every single one of them when they walk away from an interview from Mia. And I hope I embarrass you. They were like, that was the best interview I ever had. And so not only is it great to have an interview with Joe McNally, but she brings it out of them and they go, holy crap, that was awesome. So
yeah, it was a great moment. It was a great moment, and lots of really learning techniques. So take a look at this one thing, because I think that it emphasizes just how hard people who rise above the din work to be able to make a picture. Now take a look at this.
Can you tell me what's going on in this photograph?
Yes, something illegal. This is one of my favorite photographs from one of the first big stories I did for National Geographic. I was sent to London Docklands, the East End of London, which historically speaking was a very working class neighborhood into which migrated urban development. Like the Docklands became this huge financial center, and it's turned out to be quite successful. The old areas of the East End along the Thames River were populated with docks where the big ships would come in. This is, back in the day of London, East India Trading Company, all that sort of stuff. The historic tradition of being a docker. And it was very tough working class neighborhood, and there was a great deal of resentment. This picture, I got this picture because I spent about 3 weeks having lunch at that pub without taking my camera out, which was the beauty of working for the Geographic at that time. You had a lot of time to work. Geographic sent me to the East End of London, and I lived there for 17 weeks.
Wow.
And so I picked out this pub because it was really rough around the edges, like guys with tattoos on their knuckles and stuff like that. And I just walked in and I had a beer. And then I had one of the most awful lunches I think I've ever had in my life. And I kept going back and eating again and again and again. And finally, people started to talk to me. They were curious about me. Who's this Yank? And so I started talking to them, built some measure of trust after a while, and it was only after quite a while that I took out a camera and I was able to make that photograph, which ran in the magazine and is a very true photograph. It's a moment.
So you kind of work your way into places that way and endear yourself to the people somehow, it sounds like.
You have to get to know people, and you have to be sympathetic to the way they live and who they are. You have to do your research. And you also have to have an essential sympathy for the human condition that you're confronting, no matter what it is.
Right, so here is a guy that's just so dedicated to his craft that he immerses himself for months with these people to try to get them to open up, to allow him to take a picture. I mean, you want to talk about dedication to an assignment, and he lets, in that entire time, he's soaking everything in to develop where is the inspiration for this story. How can I visually tell this story? Where's the inspiration going to come from? Just amazing insight and patience.
But see, and I think that was a great takeaway from that, because I mean, the days of National Geographic being able to do that kind of stuff, he admits already are very come to a close. But what you see there is the commitment and the tenacity for wanting to be able to do that. Like, I make it very unabashed about the fact that the gods that I pray to photographically, there's 3 of them. Joe McNally is one of them. Gregory Heisler is another one, and Jay Maisel is the third. Those are the 3 people. Jay Maisel was why I started photography. And it's one of those things where my work could not be any further from all 3 of those people. Like, you look at my work in HDR or portraiture and all that stuff, it looks miles away from those 3 people. But one of the things that I admire of those 3 people, there's tons of things, but the things that I admire the most about them is the sheer tenacity for wanting to continue to get that shot. And that, it doesn't matter if it's National Geographic, it doesn't matter if you don't go to 6-month assignments anymore, because that dedication is with him, whether he's doing a personal project or a Nat Geo project.
Well, I think you could really see that drive in just about everybody that you interview with, because that drive has risen them above mediocrity, above there's a level of noise, and then there's these solo voices that rise up out of it, and it's usually based upon their drive, but also their work. They keep plugging through, and they push through that barrier and get beyond the noise.
Let's get a couple of comments here. We've got great art goes beyond the medium. When the medium disappears, the art remains. That's by Ron Clifford.
Ron's a great shooter, great guy.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Inspiration is something that moves you on the inside, despite other people's opinions. Art is subjective. Absolutely. Photography is subjective. Whatever concept or idea that drives my
inner motor
is inspiration.
Nice, great.
Mike Edwards.
Mike Edwards.
And this is by Jim Kearns. It says, do you feel inspiration becomes harder the longer you've been photographing? It seems easy when you first pick up a camera because there's so much that's new to you. It's a new world. But then once you've seen a lot, inspiration becomes a challenge. And yeah, it's true. And that's the thing, is you've become more capable, but you also have more things you've seen, so you become a little bit more jaded, and inspiration's harder to find, and you've got to get there.
Well, these guys, and that's why these guys tell me they reinvent. They reinvent themselves. I mean, Zach is a perfect example of somebody with a love-hate relationship with creativity. It's a push-pull. It's a horrible transition he goes through every year, and then he comes out, and the inspiration's there, and he makes great work.
And this is a great quote by Alexandra. It says, the camera can shoot everything. It's what you can shoot that really matters. And that's by Alexandra. It's, that's the key. We can capture anything, but it's what you capture that makes it special.
Good. Hi, why don't we do this? Let's take a quick break. We just want to be able to wrap up most of this stuff. When we come back, we'll talk to you guys about what to do with a giveaway and give you a couple of tips and tricks to keep you inspired when you're doing your photography. We'll be right back.
Need a little boost? Then fill up on fuel. Packed with practical tools and tips that will help you quickly advance your creative skills, these short ebooks get right to the heart of what you need to learn. Learn to shoot breathtaking nature photography, teach yourself game design, or impress your friends with the rockin' design of your new website. Written by top authors and trainers, Fuel Books offers friendly, straightforward instruction and innovative ideas to power your creativity. Starting at just $5, every Fuel Book comes in 3 formats: Mobi, EPUB, and an elegantly laid out PDF, so you can choose the reading experience that works best for you on whatever device you choose. Fuel Books, designed to inspire you.
Welcome back, everybody. RC here with me, McCormick, and Pete Collins, talking about inspiration. A little brain food for you guys to be able to have in the middle of the week. Well, we hope that it's a little bit of brain food for you. We've talked about the concepts of inspiration and the concepts of hard work and the concepts of persevering and kind of rising above most of this stuff. And while we're on the subject, I'm very biased about most of this stuff. I think that the stuff that we do at KelbyOne is phenomenal at doing that. I think that what we do from a training standpoint and then what we do from an inspiration standpoint, a lot of credit to you, has it takes you to the next level to be able to build most of this stuff. So on the KelbyOne website right now, recently, we just finished releasing an inspiration series with Dixie Dixon.
And if you want to feel fresh about what you're doing, if you want some idea, I mean, that's the word that just, when I interviewed Dixie, I came away with this feeling of fresh, new ideas, energy, just like infused with energy to do something different. She is fantastic.
Right, so it's a great way to be able to get kind of a new perspective on things. Thanks so much for that, Mia. We also have, completely on the opposite side of the fence, and one of the things that I love the most is that we have Rick Salmon releasing a class on May 8th on safari work. So it's one of those things where a lot of the times I draw a lot of inspiration because the chances of me going on safari, very little. It's like one of those like bucket list things. I mean, I want to do it. Don't get me wrong, I want to do it, but it's one of those things where it's like I'll get to do it at one point, right? But so watching Rick do it and give me ideas on how to be able to do it, that's going to recharge the batteries.
Well, and that's what I love about. Listen, I love to watch TV, I love to watch movies, but I also have started having the habit of going in and putting on a class or an interview or whatever, because what happens is it's not just I'm being entertained, but I'm being inspired, and I'm learning. Learning is inspirational. It really is. If I learn something new, I'm inspired. And so I was a fan. I was a member before I ever came on staff. This thing, it's such a great, inspiring platform. I'm
going to totally out myself, but it's like one of the things that I do is I'll throw it on the phone in my car, and I'll drive places. And I don't watch it. I just listen to it. I don't watch it. I just... Stop.
We've seen him drive. I'm just saying.
I'm just saying that I like to listen to it as I'm going by and doing stuff. So it's one of the things that I find very refreshing to be able to catch up on most of that stuff. Now, this is also a good time for us to talk to you about the PeachBit e-deal, right? So the ebook deal, 40% off of Kelby viewers, Presentations and Design by Gar Reynolds. So Gar Reynolds produced the first book, which was Presentation Zen, which was a great book. And now you can save 40% off of the ebook deal. Make sure that you go to peachbit.com/KelbyOne and enter in the code KelbyOne, and then you can get a copy of this book. I think that's pretty cool. So another design inspiration. We just want to talk about photography and story and things like that. Now, I do have to read one comment that I was very happy to see. Somebody said, Jim Kearns said, Pete, RC, Mia, some of the best grids are the ones that don't deal with the technical. Thanks for a great topic. So, and I think that
Glad you enjoyed it.
I think you guys really
saying I'm not technical? Come on, I am the technical king around here.
I'm sure you are.
Whenever RC gets in trouble, who does he come to?
I can't turn the finger long enough. But I mean, and that's what we wanted to do here. I wanted to just try doing something different. We talk about f-stops and shutters and the top 10 things that we do all the time. But sometimes just to kind of be able to sit back and just wax about this kind of stuff, I think hopefully that kind of just kickstarts a lot of these batteries and gets you thinking about what it is that you want to be able to do for this. Now, a contest time. What do we have to do here? Mia, sorry.
Hey, while you're doing that, real quick, if you'll jump over to my screen, I talked about Brian Roger Jr. before. This is his website, digitalartthatrocks.com. If you go over to his blog right there, this is the time lapse that you can see. If you are not a KelbyOne member, you can see it right there on his blog. But if you are a KelbyOne member, way to go. Come check it out over there.
Nice. Awesome. Now, for the contest, this is what you're going to do. You're going to go to KelbyOne.com/contest. So inside of here, this is where you can fill in your name, your email. Tell us what show you are. Tell us your website. We'd love to be able to take a look at your website. We want to hear from you. We want to hear about the types of things that you want to see on shows like The Grid and Photography Tips and Tricks and Photoshop User. Oh, this is your show. We work for you guys. We want to know what kinds of things we can help, what kinds of problems we can solve for you for that. One of you guys is going to win the HDR book and Down and Dirty Tricks by Corey Barker. A phenomenal, phenomenal book from a very, very talented Photoshop artist. And the HDR book, which I got to tell you personally.
From a very, very...
You know what? I feel very personally invested in this book because it's like everything from like the printing of it. It just looks cool. I was so happy to see it come out, and I'm like, it looks amazing. So I'm very unabashed in telling people, I hope that you guys consider the book. I think it's probably some of the best techniques out there on the market for HDR. And I think it looks beautiful, and I think it's going to cut to the chase. If you're into this HDR stuff, it will take you to the next level. Guaranteed for most of that. Now, hey, more Mia interviews. Doug Evans.
Working on it.
And so we got a bunch of stuff. If you have any ideas of who to be able to talk Doug Evans, please let us know for most of that.
Who do you want to see?
Well, we really do, and we really do. Every week we get to see all the comments and the suggestions, and we file them away, and we go, yes, if we get enough of certain ones, we go, hey, let's try doing this or that. So we don't just take your comments and throw them away. We look at every one of them. So make sure you send it in. If you want more Mia interviews, definitely send that in.
All right, great. Now, hey, listen, it's about time for us to be able to wrap this stuff up. Pete Collins, if people wanted to follow more of the stuff that you do, where can we send them?
PeteCollins.com is my website, blog.
So PeteCollins.com, that's a place where you're going to talk a lot about, anything, design stuff, or, do you talk more than just...
Yeah, if you come over here, I've got two main things over here. I've got my imagery where I show you different stuff, my composites and stuff like that I'm playing with. And then I've got my illustrations over there. But what you're going to find out where I'm doing most of my new stuff, it's going to pop up over here on my blog on here at PeteCollins.com. I talk about blending layers. Depending on what strikes me, I'm going to share with that the newer stuff over there. But you can come in and you can take a look at that. Here's one of my illustrations from the illustration stuff. And that's where I play over there.
Perfect. Wonderful. Wonderful. Now, Mia, if we want to find out more about the work that you're doing on the inspirational interviews, on B&H, on all of these other properties, where could we send somebody? Do you have a Twitter account that we can go to?
Absolutely, on Twitter. I'm at Mia Mac, MIAMAC, and I'm always putting up photographs of gear that I'm testing out. I test a ton of really cool gear for B&H, and I also go out to all of the expo shows, so WPPI, NAB, CES. Those are all places that I'm at, looking at what's new, what's coming up. The Panasonic GH4 is a camera that I'm getting in from B&H soon that I'm really excited to work with. I can't wait to work with it, so I'll be posting pictures about my experience with that. Nice. And that's kind of stuff.
So what's been your favorite piece of gear, like right now, like in terms of camera? Like, is there anything that's kind of really stood out where you were just like, that was cool? I'm so excited to get my hands on the GH4 because I loved working with the GH3 because it's a great camera for filmmakers or people that are looking to become filmmakers. Mm-hmm. And as it has a Micro Four Thirds sensor, it's a decent DSLR camera, but for video, it's phenomenal. And some of the new stuff that they've done to it, I'm so excited to try it out. Like,
can you see the passion, the inspiration?
And that was the thing. Like, I was just like, I'm a journalist and I do this and I travel. It's like I didn't mean it, but I was calling her like a female Anderson Cooper. I'm like, she's out there and she's doing this. But at the same time, I was just like, but she's techie. And I was just like, what kind of gear? And then that's when you see she's like, oh, and if we can work on this and we can work on this. And I'm like, she's techie too. She's techie too. So Mia, thanks so much for coming by. Thanks so much for filling in. And I hope to see you on these kinds of things more.
Yeah, me too. I had a great time.
You had a great voice to most of this stuff. If you guys want to follow anything that I do, you could always just go to aboutrc.com. If you go to aboutrc.com, you can catch all of my social sites. And obviously, you can see a lot of my stuff over on KelbyOne.com. So for Mia and Pete Collins and myself, and for all of you guys, thanks for sticking with us. Hopefully we've given you something to consider on Inspiration here on the Grid. Take care, everybody.
Bye.